So now we're going to move into the next major section of the course, and that is the survey of life. So we've looked at all these different things, DNA and enzymes and cells and cellular reproduction and life cycles, and all these things apply to life in general. And so what we want to do now is look at the different kinds of life that are out there. So we're going to spend the next number of lectures kind of surveying life from single-celled organisms all the way through mammals, ultimately, in kingdom Animalia. But first we have to consider the system that we use to classify life. And though the system works fairly well, it is not as clear-cut as you might think. We have a desire to put things in boxes, to put labels on things, and it doesn't always work that neat and clean in life. But that's also what makes it interesting and exciting. Now, the current system that we use is called the Binomial System, two-name system, and it was really popularized by a guy named Carl Linnaeus. He was Swedish back in the 1700s. And so some of his original classifications when he started to survey different kinds of life and plants and animals are still used today. And that binomial system is what you think of as the scientific name for something, the genus species. And we'll look at that as we look at the taxonomic hierarchy. So taxonomy, then, is really the science of naming and classifying the diverse forms of life. Now, when we look at the different kinds of life, this system has changed and evolved over time. And even what I was taught to when I was first taking college biology classes has changed considerably. And so I was taught the five kingdom system where all prokaryotes were put into the kingdom Monera, that top line on the far left. And now we really moved to a three-domain system. And even within the three-domain system, under domain eukarya, we have kingdom Protista, which has really broken down and gone away. And we'll talk about these things. But I want to emphasize with this slide this idea that it's constantly changing. And it's changing because we're studying and learning things more. And that's how science works, right? So you have a current model, but you need to continually go back and refine that model as you learn more about the world. Now, originally, most of taxonomy was based on phenotype, right? And we understand what phenotype is if you don't go back and review. Phenotype being the physical characteristics of things. Now, all that was done before we understood what DNA was and how genetics worked. And now we can actually look at the DNA of organisms, compare it directly. We can talk about how related they are to each other. Are they the same species or not? And that all relates back to evolution. So let's walk through an example of the taxonomic hierarchy to kind of get a feel for how this works. So each level of the hierarchy is going to be more specific. So we'll first walk through from biggest to smallest, from the most general to the most specific, and then we'll go through a second example starting with the most specific and going to the most general, so you get a real feel for how this works. Now, you don't have to know the specific examples, but you do have to know all the levels of the hierarchy. And I'll give you a mnemonic to help you with that in just a couple slides. But let's look at Homo sapiens, our own species, as an example. So we are in the domain eukarya, meaning that all things that have eukaryotic cells are more related to each other than they are to things that don't have that criterion, that being eukaryotic cells. So if you're eukaryotic, you're in the domain eukarya. Now, within the domain eukarya, if you're multicellular and you don't photosynthesize, you're an animal. So Animalia, well, that's one characteristic of Animalia. But kingdom Animalia, then, if you're in kingdom Animalia, you're more related to all the other animals than you are to things that aren't animals, even though they may be eukaryotic. More specific than that, if during your development you had a notochord, you're in the phylum Chordata. So domain is the highest, then we have kingdom, then we have phylum. Now, you don't have to know the subphylums, but in this case, we're going to talk about vertebrates. So later when we talk about animals, so vertebrata means that your notochord developed into vertebrae, like you have a backbone. And so all the things that have a backbone are probably more closely related to each other than things that don't have a backbone. So we are in subphylum vertebrata. We are also in class Mammalia. So we're warm-blooded, we don't have feathers, and we have teeth. And females can nurse their young. So everything that has those characteristics are mammals, and we're all more closely related to each other as mammals than we are to things that aren't mammals. So we're in subclass Eutheria. We're going to talk about Eutherians and Metatherians and Prototherians, so I'm going to throw this in there as well. But again, you don't have to know subclass. But we don't lay eggs. We don't develop in a pouch. We come from a placenta, so we're Eutherian. And so we're more related to all things that develop with a placenta than we are the things that don't. We're in the order Primata. We have opposable thumbs. We're in the family Hominidae. We don't have a tail. We walk on 2 legs, and we have an F-shaped spinal cord. Now, this is a very specific group now. There's not a whole lot of individuals in our family. In fact, there aren't any at all. We're in genus Homo, meaning man, and we're species Sapien. So that distinguishes us from other species of Homo, like Homo habilis or Homo erectus, which are extinct. So we are the only living species in our genus. So Homo sapiens, all of our most closely related species are extinct. So you have to go back to primates to get to our most closely related cousin. As we talked about, we have a common ancestor with chimpanzees. This is probably 7 or 8 million years ago that we were part of the same species. Now, so each of these levels of the taxonomic hierarchy are more specific. So we are more closely related to all other humans than we are to things that aren't human and may have opposable thumbs, like the primates. Now let's take that and reverse it with a different graphic, too, to kind of show you how we get more inclusive if we start with the species. So again, our genus species is the scientific name. So Ursus americanus is the American black bear. So the genus is Ursus, and the species is Americanus. So if you were to say to someone, oh, I'm studying Ursus americanus, you're studying, oh, they go, oh, of course, you're studying the American black bear, right? So that particular species is very specific. Now, it's within that genus, though, there are other Ursus, right? So polar bears and grizzly bears and what have you. If you go to family, now you include the panda bears, so Ursidae, right? And then you can go to carnivora as the order, right? So all the carnivores that are related to each other. Now wolves and the big cats. And then you can go to class Mammalia. Now they've gotten so far away from the species that we are included in Mammalia, right? Chordata. Black bears are also chordates. In Mammalia, they're animals and they're obviously eukaryotes. So in their domain Eukarya. So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Those are the levels of taxonomy that you need to have in your head and know their level in the hierarchy. So here's a simple mnemonic to help you memorize that. Dumb King Philip can only find green snakes. Now, students oftentimes come up with their own mnemonic, their own trick to remember it, and that's fine. This is what I learned, so I'm sharing it with you. But dumb is domain, king is kingdom, Philip is phylum, can is class, only, order, find, family, green, genus, snakes, species. So if you have a little sentence, that can help you remember it. And I still have to use this all the time. Domain and kingdom and phylum are so big, they're pretty easy to remember, and we're familiar with, oh, the animal kingdom, or oh, the plant kingdom. But when we get down to class, order, and family, sometimes it's hard to remember which one of those comes before the other. So it's really helpful to have some kind of mnemonic that can help you memorize that. So again, remember, our taxonomy starts at the highest level, and we're going to now study some of the different organisms in each of the different domains and each of the different kingdoms. So we're going to start with the bacteria and the archaea as prokaryotes, and then we will move on to eukarya and delve into examples from that.